Tonight, President Trump's budget acts preparing to swing at the largest agency in the federal government, with deep cuts at the Pentagon now on the horizon. Sources tell ABC News Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has asked top Pentagon officials to draw up plans for a sweeping 8% cut. The department hasn't seen cuts this deep in more than a decade.
So deep, but it won't put your ass to sleep. The question is, what are the details, Cenk? Are we gonna see Pentagon cuts in areas where it really matters, or is this gonna be a ham-handed approach similar to what we've been seeing with the firing of federal government employees? Well, there is a memo out now ordering the Pentagon to cut their budget pretty significantly, as was just revealed in that clip. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, seeing Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense in his official role is funny every time. But having said that, I actually agree with parts of this plan. In fact, I agree with several parts of this plan, but it also has a couple of parts that I definitely do not agree with and that are problematic. So let's dive into it.
All right, so let me give you all the details. So here's what we do know as of right now, thanks to this memo obtained by the Washington Post. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered senior leaders at the Pentagon and throughout the US military to develop plans for cutting 8% from the defense budget in each of the next 5 years. So that is significant, like that's a lot. Now, the Pentagon budget for 2025 is about $850 billion. And if this directive is actually adopted in full, those cuts would include tens of billions of dollars in each of the next 5 years. Now, the memo includes a list of 17 categories that the Trump administration wants exempted from the budget cuts. Among them are operations at the southern US border, operations to combat transnational criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere, modernization of nuclear weapons and missile defense, acquisition of submarines, one-way attack drones, and other munitions, the Pentagon's audit. So they want to ensure that there's still money to audit the Pentagon, which makes me very happy. Now, Hegseth ordered the proposed cuts to be drawn up by Monday, but how exactly these cuts will be carried out is pretty unclear at the moment, totally unclear. And by the way, there's some indication that any money saved could actually be spent on defense projects anyway. So first of all, in his memo, Hegseth said the request for proposed cuts constitutes a relook at the Pentagon budget. The branches of service, he wrote, should fund what they need for a wartime tempo and offset that financially by cutting low impact items such as diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and climate change studies. Additionally, Robert Salesses, a senior Pentagon official, said in a statement that the money saved could be realigned to pay for new priorities in the Trump administration, including the Iron Dome for America, Trump's catchphrase for an expansive missile defense system. That sum could amount to $50 billion in next year's budget, he said. I can't believe that would only cost $50 billion. Like, the US is massive, obviously.
No. Here's what they mean by that. So I thought the same thing, so I looked into it a little bit more. They mean that 8% savings are about $50 billion, and they could be realigned towards Iron Dome. Okay, now, so that made me think several things. Okay, so $50 billion, when I started tweeting about it and Elon said yes and Don Jr. said yes, etc., I started saying 400 billion. Now we're down to 50, but okay, over 5 years, $250 billion. By the way, if they actually implemented that and we just got them as actual savings, not bad, not bad. I'd give that a lot of credit for that if they actually did that, right? So I'll take that. In fact, there's one other thing that I like in this proposal. But wait, they're not savings. You're just reassigning the money within the Pentagon. So that equals 0 cuts.
So let me read more, okay?
And then I want to wonder about, wait, which companies would get contracts for Iron Dome? Would Starlink get some contracts? I don't know.
Does he make missile defense systems?
So he's definitely a defense contractor at this point.
No, he is. Yes, he is a defense contractor. Starlink has been used in Ukraine, for instance.
So to be fair, I don't know. But if this turns into a $50 billion a year doesn't get cut, it just gets reallocated to Elon Musk, the degree to which I'm out is indescribable.
Yeah, obviously.
You're right,
yeah.
But to be fair, we don't know that yet. We do know that this talk of it is not cuts. It's just not cuts. It's reassigning it to this mysterious project. By the way, Iron Dome in America is impossible. It would take an overwhelming amount of money. The 250 billion wouldn't come close to doing it.
Yeah, that's why that 50 billion figure jumped out at me. But now that you explained it, I understand what you mean or what they meant. Now, William Hartung, who's a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, tempered celebration about the cuts, writing, upon clarification, it became clear that the plan is not to reduce the Pentagon's top line, but to shift any savings found in one part of the department to pay for other systems and activities more in line with the preferences of the administration. This was actually something that Ken Klippenstein kind of warned me about during our conversation for my Substack Unaligned. And that really did jump out at me as part of our conversation, because I'm like, I could totally see that happening. Now, Hartung also described the plan as moving around funds inside the Pentagon. Nonetheless, the war industrial complex is absolutely shook. On Wall Street, stocks for Planeteer, Lockheed Martin, and several other major defense contractors tumbled after the Post published news about Hegseth's directive. Now, look, Elon Musk and Doge are reportedly looking to lay off thousands of civilian employees at the Pentagon. So for instance, one Pentagon spokesperson said that Hegseth has directed defense officials to evaluate the probationary workforce with a determination already made that some civilian probationary employees will be separated from service in the near future. It is not in the public interest to retain individuals whose contributions are not mission critical, this Pentagon spokesperson said. But even if you're totally fine with those, workers being fired or with reducing personnel, it's not really going to make a big enough dent in the defense budget to mostly focus on that. Let's take a look.
In the context here, I think there are two pieces: personnel at the Defense Department and procurement. You know better than I do that procurement is where the real money is, and there are ways to find weapon systems that can be manufactured more efficiently, less costly. It's been a constant story at the Pentagon. That's where the real money is, isn't it?
Well, it is, and if you're going to save that real money, you have to make substantial cuts in individual weapons programs, such as doing away with a new aircraft, a new fighter jet, a new tank. You can't just nibble around the edges. You have to make significant cuts in significant places. And I don't think there's anybody who thinks there may not be room for that. But again, those defense manufacturing jobs, that's bread and butter for both Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill.
That is absolutely true. Legal bribery from defense contractors absolutely is bread and butter for Democrats and Republicans in Congress. And so, look, Doge is also targeting staff at the Department of Veterans Affairs, which really, really bothers me, because if anything, they should be bolstering, resources for our veterans. Nonetheless, 1,000 federal workers have already been fired from the VA. And I'm sure that's going to have an impact on our veterans and the services that we're supposed to be offering them.
Yeah, as you'll see later in the show, Jesse Waters complaining that, well, I didn't mean fire my friends who are veterans. Well, that's kind of how it works. Sad day for you. All right, so now important stuff here. First of all, I now see some Democrats beginning to fight against cuts at the Pentagon.
Are you surprised?
No, what are you doing? It's political malpractice, let alone the fact that you guys see what did I tell you about good cop, bad cop, uniparty, establishment Democrats and Republicans? When push comes to shove, all the Democrats who said they wanted to cut the Pentagon, all of a sudden don't want to cut the Pentagon. Okay, so to be fair, not all the Democrats. Bernie Sanders has the same exact position that we do. Ro Khanna has the same position as we do. But look, if you're a Democrat, how do you fight back in a way that's effective? You go, hey, I love the cuts, but they've got to be actual cuts, and they can't be going to other defense contractors, no matter who they are. That makes no sense. But if you do the cuts and you send it to the taxpayers, or you pay off the debt, then we're in. because then you gain the moral high ground. Then you're with the great majority of the American people who actually do want to cut the Pentagon and want the money to go back to them and not to another defense contractor.
Can you imagine if we lived in a world where Democratic lawmakers realized, hey, you know what? This is actually something that we have alleged that we wanted to do. So now that we have an executive branch that also alleges that they want to cut the Pentagon budget, let's be part of the conversation rather than automatically take the opposite position.
Yeah, and part of the reason they take the opposite position is because, oh, Trump bad, right? But the main reason is donors good, right?
100%, yes.
So, all right, last things are, at least they didn't cut service members. They were smart enough not to do that. So they're cutting Pentagon employees, but not the actual troops. So just want to be clear about that. And then lastly, they're shuffling the budget around in terms of the map and where our priorities are geographically. So they're putting more money into Asia, et cetera. I think the military kind of reaction we have to China is absurd, but okay, at least I get it. They view them as a top strategic competitor, et cetera. So where are they taking the money away from? One is Europe, and a lot of people are verklempt about that. Now, I get why you'd be a little upset these days, given how aggressive Russia is. But outside of that, Europe, at some point, you do have to defend yourself. Like, we've carried you for a long, long time.
Yep.
That's the thing that Trump's not wrong about, okay? And then the other places they're taking money away from is the Middle East. That's great news. Because the old way of thinking is, oh, we got to put all of our money in Israel, the Middle East, right? And we got to pull all of our aircraft carriers, all of our bases, et cetera, to fight the Muslims, the terrorists.
Cenk. Sweet Cenk. You sweet man.
What? So you're saying they're not going to do it?
I would bet everything I own. I would bet the shirt off my back that ain't gonna happen.
No, don't get me wrong, guys. With all these things, and Anna's right to throw in that note of skepticism. I'm telling you what they say they're going to do, right? I'm not telling you that they're definitely going to do it. So when I suggested that, hey, wouldn't it be great to cut the Pentagon? Some people thought that meant that I instantly believed that Trump and Elon Musk were angels and that they would cut the Pentagon, and I was positive of it. No, what I noticed was that the voters, MAGA voters and independent voters were like, hell yeah, cut the Pentagon. I'm on the side of the voters, not on the side of any slimy politicians. So now, do I think they're actually going to cut the Middle East? No, probably not, because obviously Miri Madelson, AIPAC, et cetera. But the very fact that they're verbally saying cut the Pentagon and riling up their side to cut it, that rhetorically is super helpful, because one day you might get a real populist who then says, hey, you guys said you wanted to cut the Pentagon, let's actually do it this time. And then somebody who comes in and says, you said wanted to cut our troops and our presence in the Middle East, why don't we actually do it this time? And that person, right wing or left wing, would be enormously popular.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.